Tears for Fears are back with their first new album in 18 years. Was it worth the wait? My review of The Tipping Point is coming up next on Track by Track. Hey everybody, my name's Kyle, and this is Track by Track, music reviews, news, and commentary. Thanks for tuning in today, and if this is your first time here, please take a second to click subscribe so that you won't miss future reviews and more. It's been a long road to the new Tears for Fears album. Going back 18 years to Kurt and Roland's last album, Everybody Loves a Happy Ending seemed like a prophetic title. As the years went on, it seemed more and more likely that truly could be the end. And though there was a 9-year gap between that 2004 album and its 1995 predecessor, Raúl and the Kings of Spain, let's remember that and 1993's Elemental were both made without Kurt. Taking that into consideration, there was in fact a 15-year gap in the Kurt and Roland partnership between Seeds of Love and Happy Ending. So suddenly the long wait for The Tipping Point is maybe not so long after all. It's not for lack of trying, though. Efforts to create a new Tears for Fears album actually began in earnest several years earlier, which found the group paired up with contemporary songwriters and producers in an effort to create new Tears for Fears music that might connect with younger generations as well as original fans. They ended up recording an entire album that way, in fact, before ultimately abandoning it almost entirely because they felt it didn't truly represent who they are. The turning point for The Tipping Point was actually the album's opening number, No Small Thing. Leaving behind all the Uber producers and studio wizards, Kurt and Roland sat down with acoustic guitars and returned to the craft of songwriting in its most organic form. I think you really get a sense of that on the album, that this song is a new beginning, and in more ways than may be apparent. I love how it starts out with that same intimate feeling and then evolves into something much more grandiose. It's a song steeped in Americana, but as it develops, we hear it transition into familiar Beatles territory, with a distinctly day-in-the-life sort of build in the middle and again at the coda. You may have heard me talk about track order in reviews before, sometimes expressing the opinion that the wrong song was used to open an album. Here, for perhaps the first time I can think of, we have a song that feels like it would be just as effective as an album closer as it is as an album opener. It's a complete journey in and of itself. And that's perhaps part of the problem I had with the album's title track, which arrives at track 2. Hard to believe it's been over 5 months since the song was released as the album's first single, but as we've established, Tears for Fears do take their time. When it came out, I was thrilled to have new Tears for Fears music in the world, but I was less than enamored by this particular song. Unquestionably, there's some emotional heft to the lyrics, especially considering Roland's personal turmoils in the years leading up to this. But musically, I don't think the song quite pulls the same weight. The melody lacks any development, particularly between the verses and the chorus. It's all the same, but just varying levels of intensity. I also find it a bit too derivative of other contemporary acts, Coldplay in particular. All that being said, I think the song works far better within the context of the entire album. Between those two songs, though, I think we have prime examples of the sort of identity crisis I'm feeling on this album. There seems to be a tug of war between songs that want to revel in the unique sonic space that creates that almost undefinable TFF sound, and songs that seem more interested in fitting into the contemporary music scene. In recent interviews, the band has repeatedly stated that they are not interested in making commercial music. Okay, pause a moment here. If we all had $1 for every time an artist said they didn't care about making commercial music, we'd all be as rich as they are. It's a cliche. The only time I would have believed it would have been if Lou Reed had said it about his Metal Machine Music album. Truth be told, nearly half the tracks on The Tipping Point have a decidedly commercial gleam about them. I have a feeling that stems from the influence of working with younger producers on the album they abandoned before getting back to basics. Two prime examples of this are My Demons and End of Night. Both are solid rockers with good arena-filling energy, and as such, they're enjoyable enough. At their core, they're both well-written songs, but from a music and production perspective, you'll swear somebody snuck a couple of Muse tracks into your playlist. And you know, Muse is great at being Muse. But I'm not looking for Tears for Fears to be Muse. Honestly, what I would have preferred is to hear how these tracks could have developed if Kurt and Roland had kept it more organic. That's not to say all acoustic. Look at No Small Thing at the beginning of the album. It's big production, as are My Demons and End of Night, but where No Small Thing feels like the work of auteurs, these songs feel like the work of charlatans. One song that seems to strike the right balance, though, is Rivers of Mercy. Where the song The Tipping Point seemed to channel recent Coldplay, this song feels like it channels that same band, but from an earlier, and dare I say, better era. Pros and cons, I suppose. I do enjoy it musically, but what really elevates it above being derivative is the songcraft. Musically and lyrically, it's a beautiful number, and one of the best on the album. Still, here's hoping Chris Martin and his band never cover it. Now, when I've talked about Tears for Fears before, I've been accused of still wanting them to sound like songs from The Big Chair. Nothing could be further from the truth. I've enjoyed the evolution of Tears for Fears' sound throughout their career. Seeds of Love was a fantastic album, and one that arguably sounded nothing like Big Chair, making it a huge risk as a follow-up. I also loved Elemental and Kings of Spain, in spite of Kurt's absence. And Happy Ending is, in my opinion, a criminally overlooked album that never got the respect it deserved. Across all of the band's discography, starting all the way back on The Hurting, their sound has constantly evolved while somehow simultaneously retaining a certain vibe that always made it patently Tears for Fears music. I don't get that sensation as strongly on some of the aforementioned songs. To quote one of the bonus songs on their 2017 Greatest Hits collection, "I love you, but I'm lost." Thankfully, it's a fleeting sensation. If anything, the rest of the songs seem to celebrate the Tears for Fears sound spanning its entire evolution. Long, Long, Long Time is a song that could have felt right at home on the Everybody Loves a Happy Ending song cycle. Then there's Master Plan, certainly the most Beatlesque recording on the new album. Its subtle hints at Strawberry Fields could fool anyone into believing it could have been a lost song from the Seeds of Love sessions. But if there's one song that most blatantly and most successfully recalls an earlier era, it's Break the Man. If anything, this is the song to lure listeners who haven't paid much attention to the band since Big Chair, or for whom the only TFF songs on their playlists are Head Over Heels and Everybody Wants to Rule the World. And you know, if that brings them back, great, because Break the Man is definitely one of the best tracks on the album, and certainly the one with the strongest hook. There's two other songs I want to make note of as outliers to the rest, and that's Please Be Happy and Stay. Those songs, along with No Small Thing, feel like the truest examples of an evolution of the TFF sound. Everything else has a quote-unquote, I've heard it before quality about it, and sometimes that's been good and others not so much. But on these songs, I feel like I'm hearing something from Tears for Fears that I haven't heard before. On Please Be Happy, we get some of the most lush instrumentation we've ever heard on a TFF song, led by a delicate piano melody and backed by some beautiful orchestrations. Yes, there's strong shades of Long and Winding Road here, but I'll be quicker to call that a Phil Spector influence than the Beatles. And if there's a flaw to be found, it could be the jazzy sax solo that just doesn't quite fit. Stay is the album closer, and if you have the aforementioned Greatest Hits collection, you've heard this one before. Well, sort of. The band has re-recorded it for The Tipping Point, which effectively makes it feel as if it was painted from the same palette. I suppose that's a good thing, and again, it's a song that actually feels both fresh and patently Tears for Fears. Still, I have to say, I feel like the 2017 version worked better. That recording was not as lush and full-sounding as the 2022 edition, but I think that gave the track a feeling of intimacy that's missing now. But, similar to what I've said about other tracks earlier, it works well within the context of the entire album and provides a satisfying and emotional conclusion. So I have to say, this album is quite a mixed bag for me. Out of the 5 Tears for Fears albums to feature both Kurt and Roland, The Tipping Point for me ranks as the weakest. And while the Roland-only albums Elemental and Raoul and the Kings of Spain both lack true moments of grandeur that The Tipping Point does achieve a few times, those efforts are both far more cohesive as listening experiences. As I suggested earlier, I think the somewhat meandering path they took to reach their destination is perhaps most to blame for the state of the final product. From the sound of it, I don't think we wanted, or at least I don't think I wanted, to hear the album they abandoned. But I feel like that exercise in some ways had a negative impact on what they ended up releasing. I can't help but wonder what we would have gotten if instead of getting sidetracked by today's hottest producers and songwriters, Kurt and Roland would have simply sat down with their acoustic guitars right from the beginning. Here's hoping that's the approach they take next time, and that next time isn't another 18 years away. So I'm giving The Tipping Point by Tears for Fears an X rating of 6 out of 10. It's a welcome, but wildly uneven return for one of rock's most underappreciated duos. Once again, my name's Kyle, and this has been Track by Track. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Plus, check out some of these other videos below that I think you might also enjoy. And of course, be sure to subscribe, because true music fans always want new releases the day they come out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.